I'm a Ramon Salazar. You're listening to the Glade Pixels podcast. Pixel Chat. Die, you worm!
Hey guys, this is the Great Pixels podcast. My name is Shane.
And I'm Nick.
And it's been a long time since we've, first of all, I think made a video, but it's been even longer since we've actually recorded a podcast together. I don't really know how long it's been specifically. We've been meaning to do it, and we've actually gotten together several times to record a podcast in the past couple months, but every time we usually just end up blowing it off and, playing games or, doing whatever.
Having a grand old time.
Yeah, exactly. So we've been meaning to do it, and now we're finally doing it, and we have a lot to talk about. Unfortunately, we can't talk about everything. We talked about everything we've been playing over the past, month, or probably even more than that, probably 2 months or something.
Yeah, something like that.
It would go on forever. I think I probably played probably 10 games, maybe even a little bit more, and I can't talk about each game in depth. I don't even know how many Nick's been playing.
Yeah, a good bit.
So when it comes to the talking about games thing, we're probably just going to pick a few games that we're interested in particular, and then just go over that. And we don't really have any big topics besides 2 movies we want to talk about. One of them is Spiderman Homecoming. We're going to try to do a movie thing every time we record a podcast. We're each going to watch a movie that I guess we both pick. I picked Spider-Man Homecoming to start with because I'm a big Spider-Man fan, and I know Nick likes Spider-Man a lot too. Neither of us had seen the movie, and I've owned the movie for a year or 2 now because Nick bought it for me for Christmas one year. So I finally decided to watch it the other day because I was on a huge Spider-Man kick. I played 5 Spider-Man games, which may seem like a lot, but all of them are really, really short. So it really wasn't too hard to get through those, and I started reading the old Stan Lee and Steve Ditko comics again, which are a lot of fun. I rewatched the Raimi trilogy in one go, just marathoned it while my parents were away for an anniversary weekend. That was pretty dope. And then I finally watched Homecoming for the first time. So let's concentrate on Homecoming first, and then we'll get into John Wick 3, which we saw tonight a few hours ago.
Real quick before we get into the movie discussion, you may hear something a little bit different. We actually got a little equipment upgrade. This is the first podcast that we're recording with 2 microphones, no longer huddled over the same one sharing.
Yeah, so hopefully that makes a big difference. I guess we'll kind of have to wait, to listen to the playback after it's all said and done. But
you should be able to hear us more clearly, and it's a lot easier for us to actually be in our own space now, not having to huddle over the same thing.
Yeah, it's a lot more comfortable. I can basically sit back in my chair and I have the microphone right in front of me, so I'm comfortable for however long we feel like talking, which is usually a long time.
And we have those fancy dancy arms and everything, so if we wanted to shift to face each other, get in a little bit more comfortable position, we can. So
talk politics.
Talk shop.
Yeah.
But anyway, do you want to start with Spider-Man Homecoming?
Yeah, sure. So for me personally, I haven't really followed the MCU in a long time, and I'm not really sure I ever really did. There was one moment in time a few years ago where I tried to start from the beginning and watch every movie in a row and catch up, but I don't remember where I got to. I think, I watched the Avengers, so I know I watched Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, and then I guess it was Captain America's in there somewhere. Then the Avengers. Then I think it was Iron Man 2, 3, whatever. I don't exactly remember the order. I know I've seen all the Iron Man movies. I've seen the first Hulk movie, which is the only Hulk movie actually. First Captain America movie, first Thor movie, and a few other miscellaneous ones like Doctor Strange, Ant-Man. And I've seen this Age of Ultron, Infinity War, and most recently I saw Spider-Man Homecoming. There might be a few I'm missing there, but whatever. So yeah, I haven't been super into the universe, so I haven't seen Endgame either, so I have no opinion on that.
Real quick before we get off the topic, I've been a little bit more invested in the entire MCU. I haven't watched the earlier Thor movies, but I did see Ragnarok. This was like Shane said, this was my first time seeing Homecoming. But for the most part, I've pretty much been pretty consistent. There's like maybe two or three that I haven't seen, but I've seen the majority of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so anyway, getting into Homecoming, I had put this one off for a while for no particular reason, I guess. I'm a big Raimi fanboy, admittedly. I'll just say that off the gate. Those are probably the movies that first got me into Spider-Man and superheroes back when I was a kid, and I still love watching them. You know, I rewatched them again recently and still thought they were awesome. Spider-Man 3 is it's good and bad. I still find it a really enjoyable movie, but there's definitely a lot of bad parts about it too. And not necessarily the parts you might think are bad. I mean, yeah, the dance part is stupid and whatever, but it's funny. I don't really mind that part.
It's aged great.
Yeah, so it's if nothing else, it's a really entertaining movie. I dare you to watch Spider-Man 3 and not be entertained by that movie, whether you love it or hate it. Spider-Man 2 is still like a fucking masterpiece. One of the best superhero movies I've ever made, in my opinion. Spider-Man 1 is still awesome. Actually, that movie aged even better than I thought it did. Because I distinctly remember the CGI being pretty bad in Spider-Man 1 last time I watched it, but it wasn't too bad. It's definitely aged, and it's not amazing, but it didn't really take me out of the experience too much. And this was also the first time I watched the Blu-ray edition of the movie, so it wasn't too bad. Anyway, let's get on to Homecoming, because I know I like to ramble about like anything and everything. So I guess starting off with...
We should preface this, we may get into spoilers, so if you haven't seen it, there's your warning.
Yeah, you can skip ahead a little bit, and we'll talk about games soon enough. Starting off, Tom Holland plays Spider-Man and Peter Parker this time around, and I thought he did a really, really nice job as a Spider-Man. He's probably the most comics accurate Spider-Man we've ever seen, even in terms of costume. He has like the eyes that move and everything, which I really appreciate that modern superhero movies are starting to do. I know Deadpool did that, Spider-Man did that, and it's nice to see. I'm just a sucker for the white eyes. I wish a Batman movie would do that, but whatever. I guess that's not their thing. But that was really cool. So yeah, Tom Holland, he does a really good job of playing, I think, a realistic high school kid. And this one is specifically set in high school. I think there's going to be a trilogy of Spider-Man Homecoming, or whatever the hell you want to call it, and I think they're all going to be set in high school. I think that's something they're going out of their way to do, which is fine. I prefer it more when he's in college, but that's cool. Whatever. If people want to see that, that's fine. So yeah, Tom Holland does a great job. He's really fun to watch as Spider-Man. Obviously, he's super cocky, like Spider-Man should be. And as Peter Parker, he feels like a realistic kid. You know, he's in love with this chick that he hardly even knows. The only thing he knows about her is that she's pretty much.
Which I thought was particularly funny, because
Yeah.
I feel like that's very realistic of younger people.
Yeah, that's pretty much like most of the girls I thought like I was like in love with, and like, well, yeah, just throughout the entirety of grade school, I didn't know like half of them.
Yeah.
And half of them I didn't even like talk to before. I was just like, yeah, yeah, I like her, and then I never talked to them. So, yeah, that felt realistic. And he has his friend named Ned, which I think was originally Miles Morales' friend. I think you can actually see him in the Spider-Verse movie, if you guys have seen that, which was a fucking great movie. We should talk about that sometime. But this Spider-Man movie actually completely forgoes an origin story, which I don't really like, but I understand why they did it, just because I guess so many people know the origin story of Spider-Man. But as a result of that, you don't really get to see anything about Uncle Ben. I don't even know if he's mentioned in the movie at all.
I don't think so.
Even by Aunt May. And this, you know, he hasn't been Spider-Man that long either, which I found kind of weird, that Uncle Ben was never mentioned at all. But, you know, we know the origin story and everything, so it's not that big of a deal. And the movie generally starts off with, you know, Spider-Man just swinging around town, solving various miscellaneous crimes, you know, chilling out after school or whatever, which was actually my favorite part of the movie. That's not to say the rest of the movie was bad, but that was my favorite part, just seeing him just kind of chill around and do Spider-Man things. And, you know, there's at one point where Peter and his friend Ned are going to a party, and I think Ned, after he finds out that Peter's Spider-Man, he's like, oh, you should tell people that you're Spider-Man or whatever. He accidentally blurts out that Peter knows Spider-Man.
It's a scene where they're in the gym and they overhear the girl that Peter likes talking about Spider-Man and how they all think like they're the coolest or whatever, and then Ned just blurts out, "Peter knows Spider-Man."
Yeah. So then his bully Flash Thompson is like, "Oh, Peter, you're gonna go to the party and you should bring Spider-Man or whatever." And Peter goes to the party with Ned, and he's getting made fun of by his bully Flash or whatever. So he has like the natural kid reaction where it's like, well, fuck you, I'll just prove you wrong, and I'm gonna not think this through and just dress up as Spider-Man and go in there or whatever.
Yeah.
And then in inevitable Spider-Man fashion, he gets pulled away by something else, then just leaves his friend there at the party to go chase the Vulture. And the Vulture is interesting in this movie because they actually added more of a distinct characterization to him. That's one thing I've always appreciated about all the Spider-Man movies, because if you read the comics, all of his villains are like really kind of boring as people. The only real distinct thing about them is their powers for the most part. There's a few kind of cool ones, but for the most part, I think Yahtzee said it best when I watched his Spider-Man review. Like, you could pretty much mix their powers around and they'd be like the same character. So the only thing that really separates them is their powers. But the origin story of the Vulture was pretty cool in this one. He basically starts off as like a blue collar worker working for like a kind of like a construction company that cleans up debris. And I think the movie starts right after the first Avengers movie, where there's like rubble all over the city and they're in charge of cleaning stuff up. And these, corporate people come in that I think work for Tony Stark, actually. And they say, yeah, well, we're in charge of this now, so you guys need to leave. So they're out of a job, but one of them has like a whole truck filled with like, I forget if it's like alien equipment or whatever.
It's parts from the alien ships that invaded.
Yeah, so it's all really advanced high tech. And they said like, well, should we hand this over? And they say, no, let's not do that. So basically what the Vulture ends up doing in this movie is creating like an underground laboratory where they invent like weapons, like, the former construction guys, they kind of invent weapons and armor and stuff. And do they rob places, right?
Yeah, there's one moment in particular where they try robbing a bank with their weapons and stuff, and that's sort of their whole MO is throughout the movie. Whenever Spider-Man picks up the trail on them, they're typically trying to steal more equipment. There's one scene where they try to hijack a truck, and that also has more alien tech on it. And then the big like penultimate thing is they're trying to steal some stuff from the Avengers that's being shipped away. But I just wanted to mention while we're on Vulture that he was probably my favorite character the entire movie, because you really understand why he's kind of villainous. Like you had said, like some Spider-Man villains, they're just kind of like or whatever. And like I think not particular to Spider-Man, just in the MCU, like overall, they've had kind of a really hard time making good villains. It seems like only recently they've been able to do good ones.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of like cool villains in the MCU, the ones that stick out to me are probably like Loki and Wilson Fisk were my favorites. And Wilson Fisk had the advantage of having like an entire season plus of character development.
And the cinematic, like the movies, like don't even regard the Netflix shows, which I think is kind of weird.
I don't even know if they're canon anymore, which is stupid, because it would have been cool to see like Spider-Man team up with Daredevil or the Punisher especially, because they're like so different. One's really old, one's pretty young, and one doesn't want to kill, the other one doesn't give a shit and just murders everyone.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's off topic.
But the whole, like, I like in a villain, especially in these movies, whenever I can understand and sort of sympathize with the villain, because I think that's a big part of making good villains, is like making them like sort of believable. And like he got screwed out by like those government contracts and everything, and he has like, and seeing as they are underneath like Tony Stark, like he has a legitimate gripe against them because they basically are like somewhat ruining his life. So I think that he has some of the best scenes in the entire movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, he was really cool. Other great like Spider-Man villains that they did really well on screen was Doc Ock. He was really good in Spider-Man 2. Norman Osborn was a lot of fun. I think Willem Dafoe did a great performance in that. He was crazy, and I like what they tried to do with the Sandman in Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
But that movie had too many villains, so they couldn't properly develop it. And as we all know, Venom was terrible in that movie. Actually, yeah, talking about Spider-Man 3 for a second, the Venom shows up, like, literally, like, right at the end. Eddie Brock becomes Venom, and then right away, they basically call Spider-Man to the final battle. It's like, wow, I don't even know why he's in this movie. Like, actually, I do. It's because, I guess, Avi Arad, who's, like, a Sony producer, forced him into the movie, which is why a lot of the movie is not that good. But anyway, yeah, so that's one thing I do appreciate about pretty much all Spider-Man movies, except I don't remember much about the Amazing Spider-Man villains. I don't know, they probably weren't that good. I remember the Shocker was really hard to take seriously. He was played by
Jamie Foxx.
Jamie
right?
Foxx,
Yeah.
but he was like this weird scientist guy that was like really nerdy and kind of a spaz from what I remember. And I don't know, he just wasn't that interesting from what I remember. But anyway, what else is there to say about Homecoming?
The humor's hit or miss for me. There's a lot of good moments when I genuinely laughed, and then there's a lot where I get this with all Marvel movies where they try to put something funny in, and I'm just like, well, that either went over my head or I just think it's kind of lame. So
yeah, I mean, the movie definitely made me laugh out loud quite a few times. So I will give it credit for that, because there's some movies that like I find like kind of funny, but like I don't really laugh at, like and
yeah.
This movie made me laugh quite a few times. So
I'll also
I'll give
say
it kudos for
that Ned gave me a lot of laughs. I think Ned was really well written, and really the actor who plays him, I think, did a really good job.
Yeah, Ned was really funny, but it does bring up a problem with him. Like if you compare it to like the Raimi movies, and it's the fact that we don't really know much else about Ned other than he's like a funny guy.
Yeah.
That's with Peter. Whereas in those movies, you know, you get to learn about Mary Jane and Harry and Norman and May, and all those characters around Peter also get built up, which doesn't really happen. Especially, you know, Ned is one thing. We don't know anything about Ned besides he's Peter's friend and he's funny. And May, they made like Aunt May really hot in this one. She's played by Marissa Tomei, who is always hot, especially in My Cousin Vinny. If any of you haven't seen that, she's a spicy meatball in that. But it's like the only thing they ever talk about with May is that she's hot. Like the first time she was introduced in like Infinity Ward or whatever the hell, or Civil War. Yeah, not Infinity Ward. Infinity War. It's like Tony's talking to her, and it's like, yeah, your aunt's hot, and yeah, I like to date her. And it's like, okay, yeah, whatever. And then they go out to a restaurant in this movie, and the guy like tries to get her number, and it's like, yeah, my aunt's hot. And it's just like that's like, yes, I get it. Okay, Aunt May's hot this time. Okay, you don't have to make a joke about it every 5 seconds.
That's one of my complaints with the movie. Like they harp on that like so much, and like Aunt May doesn't really do a whole lot. In general, she's just kind of there at the beginning for certain parts and then pops back up at the very end.
Yeah, well, and it goes back to the Uncle Ben thing where it's like she doesn't even mention Uncle Ben at all. She doesn't seem particularly distraught that Uncle Ben died or whatever. Whereas, you know, in Spider-Man in general, it's a big focal point. I mean, it's the whole reason why Peter even becomes Spider-Man. It just seems very weird that they never even mention that. But going on, like, about side characters, a lot of them aren't developed, and a lot of them are really different from the comics, and I don't really see a good reason for them being different. Like, you know, in the comics, Peter forms a relationship with Harry, and they become really good friends, and Harry's not in this movie. It's Ned, who was Miles Morales' friend, which is kind of weird. I forget who Peter's love interest is. Isn't her name Liz?
It's a girl named Liz.
That was actually his first love interest in the comics, which is kind of cool. And they have Betty Brant in this as well, who was you'll remember her as the secretary in the Daily Bugle, which is who she was in the comics. But they reference her like at one point in the movie where she's on like the school's news thing where, you know, like,
is she the blonde girl?
Yeah, she shows up for like only a few seconds.
Yeah.
But that's this universe's Betty Brant. Apparently, she is the same age as Peter, which is kind of weird. MJ is technically in the movie, even though they don't call her Mary Jane, and she's not a redhead. She doesn't really act anything like Mary Jane, but she is in the movie, and she becomes Peter's love interest, so-called, or future love interest at the end of the movie. They're setting up for that. Flash Thompson, isn't particularly intimidating. In fact, I think people would probably bully him because he's so lame. So that was a weird casting choice. There's just like a lot of characters that don't really feel like they're really from the comics. It just feels like they wanted to be different, which I guess is fine. Whatever. That's just not how I prefer it personally. Like if I see a comic adaptation, I'd like to see it like very directly pulled from the source material, which is what was so cool about the Raimi films is that a lot of things that you might not expect to like actually be in the comics were in the comics. Like we were watching the J. Jonah Jameson clips today, and you remember that part where he's like, "Oh, we're having a party for a hero, my son the astronaut."
Yeah.
Like he really says that in the comics like that. And you know the scene where Peter's like, "Hey, can I have an advance on my check?" And Jameson's like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Get the hell out of here." He literally says that like verbatim too. He doesn't do the laugh, but that's right in there too. Remember in 2 and 3 where Peter rides his little bike around? He really did ride a bike in the original comics and everything. Not to say like everything in those movies were particularly perfect, comic accurate, but Aunt May felt like Aunt May. Same with Uncle Ben and everything, and that's just what I prefer. But I understand there's been a bunch of Spider-Man movies, so they want to try and do something different, and that's okay. Some things work, some things don't. And I think another thing that doesn't work, besides a lot of the characters, and I don't want to say like the characters aren't entertaining, it's just I think they could be better or more developed.
Yeah, I agree.
It does bother me a bit that they're either not characters from the comics or they're random characters, or if they are characters, they act completely different, which is kind of annoying. But the other thing, disregarding the characters, is the spider suit itself, which sounds like a weird complaint at first. And it's not like it's the design of the spider suit. I actually think this might be the best Spider-Man suit we've ever gotten in a movie, just because I'm a sucker for the eyes that move, like I said. And this has that, which is pretty cool. But it's also like a Spider-Man suit, I guess, that was made by Tony Stark. And it has like all these gadgets going on with it, which are kind of cool. But as a result of that, like almost every problem that Peter has in the movie is like solved by the suit. Like he even has like an AI companion called Karen, I think.
Yeah, it's Karen.
Who like whenever he's in a bind, he's just like, Karen, like, what do I do? And she's like, "Oh, you should activate the explosive web shooters here." And it's like, "Oh, I can't control this. Oh my god."
Yeah, I agree. The suit is definitely another like big complaint of mine. And like you had told me prior about it that it kind of like gets him out of a lot of binds. So I was sort of going into it with that, but it literally is like anytime he has an issue, it's either Tony actually shows up and saves him, or the suit does something that he didn't know he could even do that saves him. With the exception of the ending, because he eventually gets the suit revoked. But it's the sort of like nothing ever seems like earned that he should have like gotten out of a certain situation, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that goes back to like the whole comics thing where it's like I don't even know, like this doesn't even feel like a Spider-Man adaptation. It feels like an like Iron Boy or something where it's like what if Spider-Man was like in an Iron Man suit, or how would that work? And I think it's a lot cooler whenever Peter uses his smarts to get out of every situation with just his basic powers. And the old comics used to get like really creative with the web stuff. Like he would like if he was falling down, he'd like fucking web up like an umbrella or something and glide down, which is a little silly, I guess, but it was still creative and weird. And by like Nick was saying, by the end of the movie, he gets the suit revoked because he's always getting his dumbass into trouble, and then Tony Stark has to come and help him out of it. And that was probably one of the coolest parts because he has to do everything just by himself. There's no AI, there's no special web shooters or whatever. He just does everything by himself in his shitty suit that he made, I guess, at the wrestling match. And yes, Spider-Man really did enter a wrestling match in the comics. You asked me that a few weeks ago. Yeah, he really did do that. So that part was cool, but like, I thought like that was a sign of good things to come in the future. But then the Far From Home trailer comes out, and he has like an even more advanced spider suit. It's like, okay, well, I guess round 2 is coming up then.
Yeah, and a big thing that I didn't really pick up on while I was watching it, but I watched a couple reviews afterwards, and it doesn't exactly appear that this version of Spider-Man, at least at this point from what we've seen, even has like spider sense. Like
Yes.
he doesn't do like anything, or like he's not very perceptive of things.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up because that was one of the number one things I noticed. Like there were so many times where it's like he gets like hit by things and it's like I don't understand how he wouldn't have felt that coming. He didn't even like try to dodge it. Yeah, that was a big complaint while I was watching it. I completely forgot about that. Yeah, that was a little weird. There was no like slow-mo, like see everything that's about to happen and then, save the day like that scene like in Spider-Man 2 where he's in the cafe with Mary Jane and he feels that like that car is about to come through the windshield and he jumps. That's a really cool scene, by the way.
There's the podcast that I was listening to. It's the CinemaSins podcast. They were doing a review of it, and they had said that perhaps maybe in this version it might be something like he's getting his powers as he's growing and developing. Like maybe he doesn't have like everything right at the beginning when he got bit. And I could kind of see that, but there's no real proof yet that that's even what's going to happen. So maybe they just completely forgo that ability in this iteration. I don't know.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, there's like a lot of weird stuff like that about this interpretation of Spider-Man. I do appreciate one scene though. There's a scene where he gets trapped under a bunch of rubble, and he's like screaming to get out, and he eventually works himself up and motivates himself to push it off him, which was really cool because that's one of the most famous scenes in the original comics, and we've never really seen that adapted before on screen. Which
it's interesting. Sorry to cut you off, but it's interesting in particular because we just complained about how everybody's always saving him all the time, and I think it actually makes that scene better because he's actually calling out for people to help him, and no one's there to do it, so he's like kind of forced to do it himself.
And he feels like a scared little kid, which is cool. I was just gonna say that the original comics did a lot better because it went on for a lot longer, and it was like an entire issue of him struggling to get out, and there was also water coming in, so he was close to drowning, so he had to do it all by himself, which was cool. But it is nice that they finally included that, regardless, even though it was kind of half-baked. But whatever, it was a cool scene.
What'd you think of the ending fight on the plane? On the exterior of the plane?
I thought it was pretty cool, I think. I don't remember it. I remember the locales. I don't remember all the choreography.
That's a big thing about it, because again, like sometimes you don't really notice it when you're initially watching the movie, but you start, especially watching a lot of these Marvel movies, you start seeing how much at times the big fights happen at nighttime, and that's a big thing typically to like help disguise CGI. And like basically all of the, like, it's very cool because it's this airplane and it's a big set piece. It's the airplane is like crashing or like it's like falling out of the sky, and it has these camouflage panels that work with like LEDs, and basically they end up breaking them, so the plane just starts sort of sparkling in the sky, and it's a very cool set piece. But I like you just said, I can't like tell you what actually happens while they're fighting, because it's just a lot of quick cuts of like, oh, Vulture's wing is like swinging this way, oh, Spider-Man's like flying on the back like holding onto a web or something. There's just not a whole lot that you can really see. So like I enjoyed it from a set piece like aesthetic wise, but like I don't think it was a very good ending fight as far as like there are some cooler set pieces throughout the movie.
But yeah, I agree about that. It was cool, I guess.
I also want to real quick just mention my favorite scene from the movie, which was a scene that takes place in a car. Basically, Liz, was that it again? Liz and Peter are going to the homecoming dance together, and again, spoiler alert, there's a big revelation that Liz's father is the Vulture. And he's driving them to the homecoming dance. And Peter knows that it's Vulture because he's had a couple run-ins with him. But Vulture doesn't know that Peter's Spider-Man. And through his own deduction based on things that Liz is by accident saying, basically, he deduces that Peter is actually Spider-Man. And they have this little interaction after she goes inside once they get to the school. and basically he lays it out on the table and gives him like an ultimatum, and knows that like he basically tells him that he knows that he's Spider-Man and everything. And it's a very like threatening scene, but it's also a really smart scene, because Peter's definitely just, he doesn't talk basically at all throughout the scene. He's just kind of sitting there listening to what Vulture has to say. But he basically suggests that he doesn't kill Peter right in the car because he had saved Liz earlier in the movie, and he's like giving him that solid, but he's basically saying, if you ever cross me again, I will end your life. And I was like, that was like no like action-y or fighting or anything, but it just seemed like a really unique scene that I hadn't seen in any other type of superhero movie, where they pretty much figure out who they're talking to at the same time. I thought it was really cool. It was probably the scene with the most drama in the entire movie.
Yeah, it was a cool scene. And also, the cool thing is, like, at the end of the movie, he's in prison, and we meet the guy who's, gonna be Scorpion. And Scorpion's like, oh, I got a bone to pick to Spider-Man. Oh, I don't forget what his accent is. He has an accent. And he's like,
Michael Mando, the actor who portrays Voss in Far Cry 3.
Yeah, and he's like, yeah, I don't want to kill Spider-Man. You probably want to kill Spider-Man too. He's like, yeah, well, I don't know who that is. Sorry. That's not how the scene goes.
But I mean, it sort of is.
It's something.
It's just not...
That's the general gist of the scene. The point is that he doesn't sell out Spider-Man anyway, because Spider-Man does end up saving his life even after he beats him, which is the Spider Guy thing to do. So good for Spider Guy. What else is there to talk about?
I hit most of the stuff that I wanted to talk about.
From now on, don't worry so much about MCU shit. Stop forcing it in your movies, okay? It's annoying. Especially this one. I feel like all the other superheroes got justice done with their first movie, and Spider-Man got it the worst, because it does not feel like a Spider-Man movie. It does not feel like they wanted to make a Spider-Man movie. They made an MCU movie with Spider-Man in it, which is how he's been treated ever since he got into the MCU. He was strangely introduced in Civil War out of nowhere. This movie is weird about that too, and it's very annoying. And I don't know if they're going to be able to fix that, because in the new trailer, I think they had Nick Fury or something. It's just like, fuck this. I don't like this. That's my main annoyance with it. It doesn't feel like it can just be a Spider-Man movie with like a short MCU tease at the end. It feels like this is MCU first and foremost. Spider-Man is in this movie, yeah, but you're probably going to see other people that are not as interesting and you do not want to hear about in this movie. So that's the most annoying thing about it, I guess. I'd rather just see a superhero movie about the superhero, not having all these other outside influences come in and say nerdy things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for the most part, I mean, it's an enjoyable movie. So if you're looking for a fun and entertaining movie, I mean, the MCU movies are pretty good about that.
They're pretty much all fun and entertaining.
Even their worst movies are better than a lot of bad movies. So I would say it's still worth the watch, but it has problems.
Here's a better idea. Just rewatch the Raimi trilogy and don't worry about it.
Or do that.
Also, another tip. Watch Spectacular Spider-Man, the animated show. I watched that for the first time recently, and that was fucking excellent. It's probably the best adaptation ever of Spider-Man. Watch that. It's better than the Raimi trilogy. By a little bit. The Raimi trilogy still has better humor, though. So it does win in that department. But Spectacular Spider-Man kicks ass. It's only 2 seasons, unfortunately. Great characterization of all the characters. Awesome animation. Awesome story arcs. It ended too soon, though, because Disney bought up Marvel. And they're like, hey, this is a Sony show. We want to make our own show now. And they made a shitty one instead. So that's unfortunate. But you can get Spectacular Spider-Man really cheap on Amazon on your Blu-ray. Get the complete series and watch that if you want more Spider-Man. That's what I recommend. That's a great show. And Spider-Verse. If you want Spider-Man content that's not the comics, Raimi trilogy on Blu-ray, Spectacular Spider-Man, and Spider-Verse, which is fucking awesome. That's all you need. Homecoming's okay. If you see it on TV, fall asleep to it. Not really. I liked it. I'll probably see the sequel eventually. If you see Amazing Spider-Man, then you should shut the TV off, though. You don't want to see Andrew Garfield's weird faces the entire time.
So, the other movie, as we alluded to at the top, that we just saw tonight is John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum. Uh, Both of us have seen the John Wick movies, really like them. Some of the best action movies to have come out in recent memory. Very evocative of, I would say, like that 80s era of just kind of action for action's sake. The stories and the worlds are really cool in John Wick, but I wouldn't exactly say they're like Oscar worthy. It's definitely sort of like Mission Impossible. It's all about the spectacle of what you're watching on screen. And this movie does a good job in that regard as well. A lot of the action set pieces are really, really great. There's still some creative kills and creative little fight choreography moments that they shove in. What'd you think about John Wick Chapter Trace?
I really liked it, but I think it might be my least favorite out of the trilogy. I'd have to watch the second one again. I know the first one is definitely my favorite, but I really liked the second one. I wouldn't say I liked it a lot less than the first one or anything. It was still really good. But yeah, this was good still. It was still entertaining. It's just, I guess at the end of the second one, they built up like all the assassins are after him in this organization, and the end of the second movie shows him running from all these people, like just on the street. So it sort of implies that there's eyes on him everywhere and he's like super paranoid. And the third movie basically picks up right after that, just getting ready for these people to come after him, because he has like a 24-hour grace period where they won't attack him until that's over, and then he's, you know, a dead man or whatever. And I kind of thought that's what most of the movie was going to be about, but it felt like only like the first like third or even maybe 1/4 of the movie was really that, and then a lot of it was him going around the world and talking to people, which is fine, but I felt like some of that went on a little too long.
It's definitely in the middle. It feels like the beginning and the end are at these very high points, and then it just sort of like makes a valley in the middle where like not like there is stuff happening. It's a lot of like more world building and like setting up of the actual plot of the movie, but it really just kind of like lulls for a good bit in the middle. Yeah,
and there was some points where I was just like kind of zoning out a little bit, because I do like the world in John Wick, but not as much as I like the action in John Wick. So there was a few times where I was like, okay, can we like see someone die now? But yeah, and the movie starts off really cool, because I think the first fight is him in a library, and he basically like just has a hand-to-hand fight with one guy, and he uses a book to kill him, which was really, really creative, and pretty much that, you know, encapsulates the best of what John Wick should be. Then there's a scene where he's like fighting in a museum, and they end up going to like a part where there's a bunch of different knives.
Yeah, there's just a bunch of display cases of knives. They each there's a pretty comical moment where they just kind of stop and then just start smashing all the glass and taking knives and tossing them at each other.
Yeah, basically, just throwing them back and forth and rolling around and stabbing and slashing and everything. And it ends on a great note with like one guy like with a knife lodged in him, just like groaning, and John grabs like an axe off the wall and just throws it. Like I have two good examples. Silent Hill Downpour. That's how Murphy would throw his weapons. If he pressed R2, he would just go like this.
Yeah, it's like a two-handed.
It's like an overhead thing. And throw it across the room. And Kratos also throws it like that in New God of War. So if you need a visual on that, those both work.
But basically, John is like, to get a frame of how the frame is organized, he's like way in the back, like completely out of focus, while you're just focusing on this guy like gargling his last few breaths, and then you just see the axe fly all the way down the hallway and hit him. Yeah,
so that was really, really funny. And I think, I guess shortly after that, he goes into a horse barn. And that scene's really funny, because he starts like slapping horses' asses, and that causes them to like kick back and start kicking the bad guys or whatever. And there's one point where he's like kind of hiding behind a horse and leading it around, because I guess the guy on the other side doesn't want to hurt the horse or whatever. And then eventually, of course, there's another funny part where John ties like a rope around one of the guys, and then just hog ties him and drags him and smashes him into like a box. And then he rides the horse out into traffic while they're chasing him on like motorcycles. That's a really cool sequence too. And then I think after that the movie slows down.
Yeah.
For a little bit.
But then as it starts picking back up, we're introduced to Halle Berry, who hasn't been
fox in this movie.
Yeah, she's really cool. She has these attack dogs with her, which I'm not 100% certain on this, but my one friend Peter apparently informed me that she somewhat had a hand in training those dogs.
Yeah,
so that built up. If you know more on that.
Yeah, I actually watched a few interviews before watching this movie, and yeah, she trained with them for a few months. And Keanu said, like, at first, like, he really couldn't interact with them at all because they would just kind of bite him. But eventually he said, like, by the end of filming, he could at least pet them. But there was a lot of scenes where, like, you know, the dogs would, like, attack or whatever, and then Hallie would just go over and go like, you know, like in their face like that. Keanu actually did that like in an interview, which was really funny.
Yeah, but like a lot of her scenes with the dogs are really cool. One in particular where there's like an enemy guard, like probably like 20 feet up in the air, and basically she calls a dog over and like bounces him up with her back, and the dog like climbs up the wall and like starts biting the guard and everything. There's a lot of really creative and awesome choreography with dogs in this.
Yeah, a lot of cool dog stunts, and that was really creative too. And Halle Berry was pretty funny in this.
There's one scene in particular with a water bottle that I know you laughed at a lot.
Yeah, the water bottle scene was funny. You know what? Whenever she spits the water back in the bottle, it reminds me of that video we were watching of that chick that's like, "Let me talk to you," and then she like puts her lips through the windows and goes, like spits all over the place. Yeah, she was great. She's not in the entire movie though. She's only in like the middle half of it, but or middle part of it. She was cool in that movie. And then at the end of the movie, it starts picking up again with the action, and a lot of cool fight scenes there. See, a lot of this movie is like kind of shootouts, which are cool, but I'd rather see hand-to-hand stuff with John Wick. I mean, gun fu is really cool too, of course. Which, well, I guess a lot of the first two were gun fu too, but which is fine. But it just depends on how you do it, because a lot of the first ones were almost like, they call it gun fu because it's like the guns are like right up against the person's head, pretty much, almost like acting like fists in a different way. So a lot of the time, like whenever he was in his house, they were right up against him, and it was really close quarters combat. And they still have a lot of that in this movie, but there's a lot of scenes where he's just kind of like shooting them from far away, like you know, shotgun off your head, shotgun off his head, and it's still fun. But I don't like it as much as the stylized stuff.
And I think there's a balancing act that needs to be struck with it. Like,
yeah,
I feel like what the first movie does really well is blending gun and fists in the same scenes a lot. And it feels like in this one, it's either you're watching a fist fight scene or you're watching a shootout scene. They don't really blend a whole lot, with the exception of when he like grabs their arm and like flips them onto the floor and stuff. Yeah,
I did appreciate the wrestling moves in this movie. It reminded me of No More Heroes. It's always a good thing. There's especially one funny fight where he does a really hardcore wrestling move and it like shatters a glass floor and they fall down like a story, which is pretty cool. But yeah, there was a cool gunfight. There was a part where he's underwater, which I think,
oh yeah, that was awesome.
I think that was an awesome part, and I think they could have done more with that, where maybe him and a few guys get like trapped underwater or something, and then he has to shoot them underwater. It was only one guy that he got to shoot, but it was still pretty cool. I like that part a lot. And yeah, the end scene has a lot of cool fight scenes that are kind of reminiscent of the mirror fight in I think John Wick 1, where there's like, it's very like a trippy room.
The House of Mirrors.
Yeah,
that's in the second one.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, where it's like a really weird room with like weird videos playing of kind of like trippy imagery, like clouds and stuff, kind of reflecting off a lot of things in the room.
And there's a lot of glass walls.
A lot of glass walls and cases, like with like skulls in them, which is a lot of fun. And that's, I think, most of the fight scenes. It's just there's also a motorcycle one, which is pretty cool. But the end of the movie obviously sets up John Wick 4, which, no surprise, they're probably going to make like 6 of them. It actually kind of reminds me of like Tropic Thunder, the intro to that, where they're showing the Ben Stiller movies, like the Scorcher movies, and they say like Scorcher 1, Scorcher 2, Scorcher 3, 4, 5, and then 6 is like on ice, or like, you know, like, I don't know, whatever it's called, like Scorcher 6 on ice or something. It makes me think they're gonna do like John Wick 6 in space or something. Like, it just keeps getting like crazier and crazier with each movie. Like, at the end of this movie, he gets like shot 3 times, and then he like jumps off a building and smacks into like a fire escape in a dumpster. And lands on the ground, and then he's like still alive and crawls away. Like, what the fuck? So you can basically survive like anything now, which is fine. It's fun. But yeah, overall, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a fun movie, but don't go into it wanting a deep story. That's what I'll say. It's not really a story movie.
Yeah. See, because I think the first one worked so well because it was a super simple setup and a story. And then as the later ones went on, sometimes there's a little bit too much talking sometimes. And the story's not quite as simple, so sometimes it doesn't work as well, but the action is always great. It's actually how I felt about The Raid 2. I never finished that movie, but I didn't like it as much as the first one because I felt like it kind of missed the point of why the first one was so good, because the first one has such a simple setup and it feels really low budget. It's just like there's literally just drug lords in this fucking drug house, and they send a SWAT team in to go up into the SWAT house and basically like kill everyone and kill the drug lords, and that's the plot of the movie. There's like other little plot threads here and there, but it's mainly just a badass action movie with a SWAT team, taking down drug lords and drug makers and everything. Whereas The Raid 2 gets really fucking weird and like has the main character in prison for a while, and the fights are cool. He has a great prison fight where he's in like a bathroom stall, which I love. That was one of my favorites. And there was like a mud fight in a prison yard, which was really neat too. But then the movie just gets very strange. It's like, this is too messy and all over the place. Fight scenes were great, but whatever. There was another movie I wanted to mention too. That kind of it's not a movie. It was Max Payne, actually, because the first game has a really simple plot, which is super badass. Main character is pissed because his wife and daughter got killed by junkies, and he wants to go after the people who created the drug and are responsible for the hit on his family. And he goes on a killing spree across New York, across one night, killing a shitload of drug lords, and then that's the end of the game. And it's just simple, and it's fucking cool. And the second one gets a bit more convoluted and everything, which is why the first one was still the best. But
yeah,
that doesn't mean the sequels were unenjoyable for all those movies and games.
Overall, the movie's pretty good, and you'll have, and like we said with Spider-Man, you'll be entertained while you're watching it. Maybe not if you're not a fan of gore, because there's a good bit of gore throughout different shots, but overall,
it's not like super gory, honestly, because like a lot of the people, like, even when they get shot by guns, it's not like there's like blood like exploding everywhere.
Yeah, it's not like visceral. There's just a lot of it's like stabs and stuff like that. Like there's a particularly gruesome part at the beginning where someone gets like stabbed in the eye, really slowly.
It's very stylized violence, kind of like a Clockwork Orange.
Yes.
Actually, Clockwork Orange is a lot more disturbing, but
yeah. So, but
I was referencing an interview.
It's not like an MCU movie. We'll say that. There's more violence here.
Yes.
But yeah. So we've been talking about movies for a while. You want to talk about some video games?
Yes. Gamers must rise up and talk about the games.
Yes. Because that's all we're good for, is rising up and talking about games.
Yes, that's all we do. I don't know what to talk about because, like I said, I've been playing so many.
I can start if you want some time to think.
Yeah, you start. I've been talking for a while.
So recently, on PlayStation Plus right now, in the month of May, you can get 2 games. One of them is Overcooked. Haven't played it. The other one is What Remains of Edith Finch. And I highly recommend, if you have PlayStation Plus, download What Remains of Edith Finch, because at the onset, when I say the words walking simulator, you might have some preconceived notions. yes, it's a walking simulator, but it has one of the most interesting and creative stories in a game that I've played in a very long time. The game is not very long. It's about 2 hours, 3 hours if you're really slow while you're playing it. But it actually has a little bit of replay value, so you can go back and do some things a little bit differently. But it tells the story of this lady named Edith who goes back to her childhood home, and her family, the Finches, seemingly have a curse where they all die due to various different things. I don't want to spoil a whole lot, and I'm intentionally not gonna go into a whole lot with this because I think it's so great. But basically, you're going around this house, visiting the old rooms. The house hasn't been touched for years, seemingly. And you find these rooms that are themed for each person that was in the family. And as you go out throughout the house, you play through the eyes of each of these characters throughout interpretations of their final moments. And they're all really creative and sometimes offer really interesting gameplay changes. I won't go into a whole lot of them, but there's one in particular where basically you play as this one brother who was on a swing and he was left unattended, and basically the wind is picking up and the swing is set up in a really weird spot. If you play, it's like basically like his legs are almost coming out over a cliff when he's extending, and as the wind keeps picking up, it's like his brother reading a letter of sort of like a memoriam to his brother, to the one that's swinging. And eventually the wind gets so bad that you're like spinning over the tree branch, and then eventually you fly off and start flying into the sky. Obviously that's an interpretation. What actually happened was he probably flew off and fell down the cliff and killed himself. But you play through all of these different things, and there's really creative and really dark moments throughout it, and it just tells a really interesting story. So I highly recommend playing through it at least once, because it's something that has actually stuck with me, like after playing it, and not a whole lot of game stories really do that. A lot of times it's more about the gameplay, but there is a particular person later in the game, I don't remember what their name was, but it has to do with a fish factory, and I'll say if you've played the game, that is one of the best parts in the entire game. So I highly recommend that you download it and play it at some point, because it's really interesting.
Yeah, that really makes me want to play it, and I downloaded that too recently, so I'll have to find a time to play it soon. And if it's only a few hours, might as well. I did mention earlier that I played a lot of Spider-Man games recently. Some of those were old ones that I have played before. Some of them were brand new. I'll list the ones I did play. I don't really care about the order I played them in. I played the Spider-Man movie game, the first Spider-Man movie game, which was a very nostalgic game for me. It was probably one of my first PS2 games, actually, so I played that a lot when I was younger. I played Spider-Man 2, the movie game, which was fucking awesome. I played that a lot too, but I traded it in years ago, and I just never had access to a copy until now, when I finally purchased it again on GameCube.
Is that the famous web slinging one that everybody always cites?
That has the best web slinging. It's one of the best Spidey games ever. I played Spider-Man on the PS1, which was also another game I played a lot as a kid, which was a lot of fun too, and I thought the writing in that game particularly was really good. Very, very funny. Especially Venom. He's a big highlight in that game. Every scene he's in, he just steals the show. And I've never been a huge Venom fan, but if his personality was like that game, I definitely would be. Most of the time, it's just kind of like, yeah, Spider-Man, I want to kill you or whatever. But in this game, he had a really good sense of humor. So that was really cool. The gameplay itself was okay. It's a really short game. I beat it in like less than 3 hours or something. That game was cool. Ultimate Spider-Man, which that's a game I have played before. Haven't played it in a few years, and I was astounded by how short it was. I beat it in one sitting in like less than 3 hours. But it is an open-world Spider-Man game, but it's not as good as Spider-Man 2. I played Web of Shadows for the first time, which people hyped up a lot for like over the years. It kind of has like cult following. I was super excited to play that game, and it was pretty shitty in the end. Like the only real good thing about it was the web slinging, which is probably the closest any Spider-Man game has gotten to Spider-Man 2. And I'll talk about Spider-Man 2 for just a second. The main reason to play that game is the web slinging. The graphics are pretty ugly. Combat's okay. Stories, whatever. Music's okay. But it's mainly the web slinging that you really need to play that game and have some fun with. That's the reason why you're buying it. The web slinging is so good in that game because it was the first one to actually attach to buildings. You absolutely cannot web sling if there's not anything to attach to. Whereas in a lot of the later Spider-Man games, they kind of try to disguise the fact that, a lot of the time you're not actually connected to anything and you're still swinging. This one is dead serious. If there's nothing to swing on, you're not swinging, which is not annoying because there's plenty of things to swing on in New York. And you can actually guide the web, which is really, really fun because if you're like going around buildings kind of near the street level, you can kind of direct it towards the building on the left, swing around there, and then direct it to the building on the right next and swing around that one. So you have like full control of everything. There's a button you can hold down to charge Spider-Man's jump, so you can determine how high you want to go if you land on a building or if you're just in the middle of a web swing. You can hold a button to accelerate near like the neutral position of the web swing to go even faster. If you're on a building, you can choose to sprint forward and like do it like kind of a dolphin dive off a building.
That sounds like fun.
To accelerate yourself forward, which helps a lot getting around. You can run up walls, which are really cool, but you have to do it if you have enough. You can only do it if you have enough speed. So everything is like physics based and momentum based and everything, which is just awesome. And there's a lot you can really do with it. There's a lot to kind of learn, and you can really become an expert with it and just really, pardon the cliche phrase, but it makes you feel like you're Spider-Man, and I have not played a Spider-Man game so far that has come really close to the level of awesome web slinging in that game, which is why that game is so cool. And also Bruce Campbell is in it, who's Ash from the Evil Dead series, and he does tutorials, and you can find his voice clips like all over the city, which is really, really funny.
Just a note real quick, you haven't played the PlayStation 4 Spider-Man game yet.
I still haven't played Spidey PS4. I really want to.
Because I know a lot of people say that the web slinging in that is really good, and just to give like a frame of reference for that.
Yeah, I've heard the web slinging in that game isn't as good because you don't have nearly as much control over it, and a lot of things feel really automated. I've played it for a bit. I don't own it, and I haven't played it super in depth. It's just like in Spider-Man 2, you could hold on to a web as long as you damn well pleased, even if you fell on the ground. You could still hold on to the web and you got to let go of it whenever you wanted to, so you could really control how high you wanted to go and when to let go. So you could do really short webs and go really fast down in one direction, or you could do really high webs, or you could swing around a pole forever if you wanted to. Whereas in Spider-Man PS4, it kind of just makes you let go at a certain point, which is really annoying. And a lot of the things like running on walls, it's kind of just like a canned animation. Like if you want to run on a wall, it doesn't matter if you have no speed, he'll just do it. Just a lot of things like that. But for when I played, it was still fun. If your web slinging isn't fun, you probably have a bad Spider-Man game on your hands. And that game,
I would say that's a pretty important part.
Yeah, and that game also has the advantage of like having actually really nice looking graphics. For once, it has a really pretty open world. You can do all sorts of cool things. I think you can like dance as Spider-Man, say hi to people, and take selfies with them and everything, which is really, really cool. And it has super high production values and everything. So there's more than enough. I'm sure, even if I thought the web swinging was like just okay, I'm sure there's enough there to make up for it. But Spider-Man 2 survives on its web swinging. I still, like, every week or two, I'll just pop that game in and web sling for, like, an hour, and then I'll go do something else. And that game's just a blast. So totally get Spider-Man 2 if you've never played it. Unfortunately, I don't think that game is ever going to be re-released because it's a movie tie-in game. Mm-hmm. But it's pretty cheap, so you can buy it on Xbox, PS2, or GameCube. I bought it on GameCube and had a ton of fun with it. So anyway, going towards Web of Shadows, what I was going to say about the web swinging is that like it's sort of like Spider-Man 2 in that it tries to attach to things, but there's a lot of times where you'll just swing even if there's nothing around really. The wall running is kind of just automated. It's not really the same as it was in Spider-Man 2. You can't go nearly as fast as you could in Spider-Man 2, and it generally just doesn't feel quite as good. But the web swinging was still quite a lot of fun in that game. Oh, another thing that makes the web swinging not as fun is that the frame rate is terrible. And it tanks the entire game, and the screen tearing is awful, and it just happens the entire game, and it gets worse as the game goes on because more enemies start flooding the city, and it's almost unplayable near the end. But the most fun I ever had with that game was just swinging around, and this is going to sound very familiar to people who have played Crackdown, is swinging around collecting tokens to power up your web slinging powers, and you just have more mobility, being able to go faster and swing higher and jump higher and everything. That was the most fun part of the game. There was a part for like an hour where I stopped doing any story missions and I just swung around the city upgrading Spider-Man, just collecting those addicting little tokens everywhere, and practicing my swinging. That was a ton of fun. The actual game kind of sucks ass, and most of it is just like really bad combat. It's just combat everywhere.
I love that change from like that was the most fun I've had. The game kind of sucks ass though.
Yeah. See, even with Spider-Man 2 though, like there's combat and stuff, but it gets the job done. You know, it's entertaining and everything. The game is never like frustrating. Basically, Spider-Man 2 isn't frustrating, and the game is super fucking short, so you can finish it in a sitting and then just have the entire city to free roam and web swing and do all the web challenges, and it's just fun. This game doesn't even have web swinging challenges or anything, so there's really none of that. It's either web swing and collect tokens or progress the story. And the story, there's symbiotes invading New York, and basically you have to stop it. And in order to stop that, Spider-Man actually has a bit of the symbiote on him again, but he's able to switch between the regular Spider-Man and the symbiote Spider-Man, so there's kind of two different combat systems, which people play up as being a really cool thing, but they're really not that different. And if you played something like DMC5 recently, the game's going to feel like absolute shit. Like, it's a terrible combat system, and I have very high standards for combat nowadays, so it's no good. It's not fun. Yeah, like, people try to make it out like, oh yeah, you can seamlessly go onto buildings and fight, and it's like, yeah, you can go onto buildings and have a terrible janky fight where the camera fucks out and you can't see anything. Half the time you make it to the top of the building and the camera is frozen up into the sky. So you have to jump around until the camera, like, you literally can't even like move it. You have to wait until the camera finally decides to come back to life and focus on Spider-Man again.
Cameraman fell asleep.
Yeah, and like I said, very janky. Enemies don't really have good tells when they're about to attack. The whole combat system just feels very awkward and badly designed. But the entire loop of the game is just, hey Spider-Man, I'm a hero that you recognize, whether it be Luke Cage or Wolverine, and Moon Knight is actually in this game, so props to that, because he's a very kind of obscure character that no one ever uses. But I got into his comics recently, and I think he's really cool. So that was a rare sight, so he was cool. But anyway, you meet up with these characters, and they're like, hey, Spider-Man, you need to go to this part of the city and kill a bunch of guys, and then come back to me. So then you go, and you have to kill, like, 5 groups of enemies around the city, and then return to Wolverine, and then he'll tell you that you need to go around the city and squash 5 ball things producing enemies, and then come back to them, and then go do this other chore, and then you can go confront the villain. And the villain fight is really boring, and they just artificially extend it by, like, after you get the life bar down, like, almost all the way, they're like, you need to chase me. And then they run away for a while, and then the life bar is fully replenished. Do it again, and then, chase me again. And then, okay, now you're on the final phase, now you can finish the fight. And it's just super they just drag it out. That's the entire game. It's just padding. There's no real substance here. It just drags on forever, and the only good part is the web slinging. So yeah, the story's kind of stupid. I don't really care about the story. The game's pretty ugly. Spider-Man's voice is the worst I've ever heard. He's very annoying. It's just the worst Spider-Man voice I've ever heard. Basically, if you have access to Spider-Man 2, I don't see a good reason to play this game. And if you do, at least play it on Xbox, because I'm assuming some of the problems might be a little bit better on that version, because it is on Unreal 3. Also, there's no post-game. So after you're done, it just shits you out to the main menu.
Nice.
And if you want to, you can continue web slinging at the end of the game, but then the frame rate's awful because all the enemies are everywhere around town.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just play like Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man PS4. This one wasn't very good. I don't know what people were talking about, but they're wrong. But let's talk about a good Spider-Man game real quick. Shattered Dimensions. That game is awesome. I haven't played that since 2011. And I was reading some Reddit posts about what people think of the game. They're like, it's kind of repetitive. So I was a little worried because I thought maybe it hasn't aged that well, but I think those people are wrong. Okay, it is a little repetitive, but listen, if you've ever played like a Suda51 game and you've enjoyed it, those games are way more repetitive than this. And those games, I bring up those games in particular because those games are typically style over substance. If No More Heroes didn't have the fun villains or the kooky music or whatever, it wouldn't be that interesting just on its own as a gameplay experience. But it has all that stuff to keep you going, and it's a very entertaining game. Same with like Lollipop Chainsaw. Not a super complex game, but it's a lot of fun, and you really just don't want to put it down.
It makes it all fighting all those enemies in Lollipop Chainsaw makes it worth it whenever you get that like music power up that you can just like run around and it's just like blasting music and everything.
Yeah, and the game is still pretty fun. But anyway, that's enough about Suda games. But Shattered Dimensions is kind of a style over substance game, even though I think the combat system is much better than anything that came before it in a Spider-Man game. And the combat is actually fun to me. It doesn't feel janky. Everything works. It's very simplistic, but everything works the way it should. The enemies aren't cheap. They have pretty good tells for the most part, and that also goes for the boss fights, which is a big thing. And actually, in general, one thing that separates this game from all the others is that it had a pretty big budget and enough time to finish. So it feels like a well-designed, complete game. But I haven't even told you the story. And the story is basically Mysterio is trying to get this mysterious artifact so he doesn't have to just do magician tricks to beat Spider-Man. He can actually become like someone who wields like dark magic or whatever. So Madame Web, who is a stupid character that I don't like, but she's in the game and she's like, she's kind of like Oracle to Batman. So she gives him like information. I don't really know her backstory, but it sounds stupid. She's like, I don't know, some spider old lady.
No, not from Madame Web.
Yeah, I don't know. She's a dumb character. I don't like her, but whatever. She's like, okay, Spider-Man, to defeat Mysterio, you must work with your other Spider-Men to go collect the tablets in different time periods or whatever. Because I guess the tablet gets shattered and it goes to different time periods. Whatever. Story doesn't matter that much.
Shattered Dimensions.
That's why it's called Shattered Dimensions. So you play as the Amazing Spider-Man, you play as Ultimate Spider-Man, you play as Noir Spider-Man, and Spider-Man 2099. So 4 different Spider-Men. And they each kind of have their different little gimmicks. Some stand out more than others. So Amazing Spider-Man is basically just your run-of-the-mill Spider-Man gameplay. He has good combo attacks, web slinging, basic moves. Very colorful worlds, definitely. I thought he had like a really nice cel-shaded art style that was really, really nice to look at. Basically what you'd expect from a traditional Spider-Man game that's not an open world game. I should stress it is not an open world Spider-Man game. You can swing on whatever you want. You can swing in the sky. It doesn't matter. It's very much the classic Spider-Man game experience, like the PS1 game or the movie game, the first one. It's very much based on those gameplay styles, just with much more upgraded combat. Ultimate Spider-Man has the dark suit, so you can kind of do tentacle and symbiote attacks, and you can go into rage mode, which is basically like a devil trigger mode, and just kill enemies, so he's a bit more combat focused. 2099 has these sections where you like drop through the sky and like dodge things, which is okay. It's like free fall gameplay.
Real quick, if I could interject.
No.
Sorry, I just wanted to get a reference for myself because I haven't seen a whole lot on this game.
Mhm.
If you had to compare like the gameplay or like the combat to another game, what closely does it resemble?
It's probably more sort of like God of War, basically.
Okay.
It's just, simple, fun combat that's punchy. It's not anything super complex like Devil May Cry. The game's not very difficult either.
Is like the X-Men Wolverine game? Is that
I guess
somewhat
so.
similar?
I haven't played that game in a while, so I can't compare it, but it's sort of like God of War in the sense that like if you're playing on Xbox, if you hold Y, you'll uppercut them up into the sky, and you can do a basic combo with X's and Y's.
Oh,
But
okay.
there's not a ton of combos or anything. Like X is light combos, Y is heavy. B, you can if you like jump and do Wii or B, you'll do like a web zip towards them, and then you can press Y to either like smack them. You can press
Jump and do wee.
Yeah, you
Sorry.
can, and yeah, if you web zip towards them, you can press B and it'll like grab them. X will do something else. You can do like whip attacks, like and like web them up.
All right,
You
yeah,
could grab
I just
them.
wanted to get like a visual.
Yeah,
of-
it's simple. I guess God of War is probably the closest, I would say. Yeah, so it's just a simple action hack and slash game that's a lot of fun. And anyway, the noir gameplay is pretty much like Batman Arkham stealth gameplay, but what if it was with Spider-Man? So if you played that, you pretty much played noir's gameplay, but it's still a nice mix-up to playing the other stuff. And each level has really fun level design, a lot of different levels and heights. I mean, a lot of different little ways to go and a lot of little collectibles and secrets to find. So they're all really fun to explore. Each has a really pretty aesthetic. The game is very, very beautiful looking. Like for Amazing Spider-Man, you start off in a jungle hunting Kraven, which looks really nice because it's like a cel-shaded jungle. There's one where you're in a construction zone, which looks really, really cool. There's one where you're in a desert fighting Sandman. Just a lot of different cool levels. Ultimate Spider-Man has it's like a highway at sunset, sorta, and you're chasing Electro through areas filled with power lines. There's one where you're on like a oil tanker in the ocean. Deadpool is like running a game show, and you have to go around and destroy cameras and find him and beat him up.
That's funny.
Yeah, noir mainly just takes place in obviously New York City in the 1930s, which is really cool. So a lot of the people speak like traditional gangsters or whatever. That's a lot of fun. And 2099 has a really beautiful like neon cyber city. That's really well done. So game always looks really, really good.
That sounds really cool. It makes me interested to pick it up in the future.
Yeah, game looks really good. It plays really well. It's at 30 FPS, but it like never drops frames. There's no screen tearing or anything. The combat is simple, but it's satisfying. It gets repetitive here and there, but like I said, the writing in the game is really good, so that's a lot of fun. Spider-Men are always talking. The game is really fun to look at and everything. There's a lot of different alternate costumes you can get, which I'm always a sucker for. It's just like everything you really want. Like all the boss fights have their own unique personality, and none of them feel cheap. They all feel well designed. I don't mind doing them at all. They're pretty simple bosses, but very satisfying. And I mean, overall, it's just awesome. The only thing I would say is that don't go into it expecting like Spider-Verse, where like they're all together and talking and making jokes, because it's really just like you play specifically as Amazing Spider-Man, going through a level with him, and then the next guy, and at the end they have a short dialogue. But it's really not like Spider-Verse that much. But you still get to experience 4 different Spider-Man universes with 4 different Spider-Men, which is really cool. And the game can get repetitive sometimes, but right when it's about to get a little too repetitive, you have a noir section that completely changes it up, and that's a ton of fun. Even though it is pretty much like Batman, you can still do cool things like climb on the walls in the dark and then like web zip them up against a wall and stuff. And I thought his sections were a ton of fun. And there's a cool like sepia filter over everything, so it's pretty much in black and white, which is really, really neat. But yeah, it's just a really, really well-made game. I don't really have many complaints, and I loved it just as much today as I did back when I played it. Highly recommend Shattered Dimensions. Super cool. So, as a roundup, real quick, I would say if you're looking for a good Spider-Man game besides Spider-Man PS4, get Spider-Man 2 on whatever console you want, because that's the best open-world Spider-Man game, and get Shattered Dimensions because it's the best like traditional linear level Spider-Man game. And just talking about Ultimate Spider-Man real quick, it is an open world Spider-Man game. I think the best thing it has going for it is it has like a cell shaded art style, which is really nice. But the web slinging is like a really, really shitty version of Spider-Man 2, and it's like fun, but it's worse than both Web of Shadows and Spider-Man 2 in terms of web slinging. It's a better game than Web of Shadows. You actually get to play as Venom in it, which is kind of cool, but his missions were really infuriating at certain points because he doesn't web sling in this game. He just jumps really high, and all of his missions are chasing somebody else, and if you get slightly behind them, you have to restart the whole thing over again, and it was making me pull my hair out. But then the game is super, super short, so it's fun. But if I had to recommend two, I'd recommend Spider-Man 2 on GameCube or whatever, and Shattered Dimensions. So those are all the Spider-Man games I've been playing. So We'll go to Nick, and he can talk about another game, and then I'll probably talk about one more, and then we'll call it a day for now.
Yeah, we've been going for a bit. A couple of just like rapid fire ones. I might expound on some of these, but just over the
we can finish with like a rapid fire actually, maybe.
Over the past couple weeks, I have wrapped up my time in Enter the Gungeon. I've brought that up on the podcast quite a few times, but I have finally achieved the 100% completion on it. I technically didn't do everything, but as far as the trophy list goes, I have the 100%. Yeah. So I was very excited because sort of how you were just alluding to pulling out your hair, the last trophy I had to do, basically I had to do... I gave 4 good attempts and messed up on all of them, and then on the 5th one I finally got it. Basically you have to fight this special version of a boss that you have to do a thing with an item with, and you can mess up the thing with the item, and then you'd have to restart the entire run again. But I finally beat it and got the 100% and promptly deleted it off my console so I can not be tempted to play it anymore. Because as I've done with the long form video on it, like I think that game is amazing. It's one of the best indie games I've ever played, and highly replayable, but I have other things that I need to play, and I can't dedicate any more time to Gungeon.
Yeah.
I played Far Cry 5, which I think is the weakest of the newest Far Cries. I haven't played 1 or 2, but I've played 3, Blood Dragon, 4, and now 5. And there's a lot of things that I liked in 5, but there's a lot of things that really irritated me and I found were really boring. I think the villains are the weakest of their newest villains. Like they're bad, but there's not really anything cool about them, in my opinion. There's a lot of weird gameplay choices that they made. It's been a couple weeks since I played, but I know there's a bunch of stuff that I just didn't like while playing, and it just irritated me more than I think it should have. And the game really outstayed its welcome.
Yeah.
It does the thing where you can go anywhere once you get out of the tutorial area, and there's 3 regions basically that you each have like a villain character, and you have to do things to like stop their organization until they come out. And basically there's a progress bar, so there's 3 stops on it, and at each of the stops you basically lose control and you have to do like a special mission with them. But the first 2 stops go relatively quickly. Like you'll be playing like normal and you'll hit them pretty regularly, and then the 3rd one takes like 3 times as long as like both of those. And I really hate when games do that, when it completely tanks the pacing whenever you feel like you're having fun and then it's just like a grind to get to your last thing.
Yeah,
it's just annoying. But it was okay. It just, that's all it was to me. It wasn't very good, and it wasn't ultimately bad. It was just okay. Played Lego Indiana Jones 2 on the PS3. I'm starting to get back into my backlog again. It's a Lego game. it's one of the older ones, so like in a lot of the newer ones they started using like voice lines from the movies that they're parodying and everything. This one doesn't. It's just kind of and stuff like that. So it's okay. I mean, it's a Lego game. If you played one, you basically played them all. The other two games that I played recently, I'm actually going to be doing backlog review videos on. I haven't recorded them yet, but it was Split Second, the racing game, and also Battlefield Bad Company. I had never played Bad Company. I've played Bad Company 2, and then like 3, 4, 5, and 1. So I played a good amount of them, but I never got around to the first Bad Company. I thought it was enjoyable, but the control scheme is absolutely fucking idiotic. Like, I don't know what they thought. I don't know how they thought that felt fun.
Yeah.
Like, it's just weird buttons. Like, driving and braking are on L1 and L2. Like, I've never had a game that's been like that.
Mm-hmm.
The FOV, I mean, a lot of people point out FOV on consoles as being incredibly bad. Most times it doesn't really affect me. This game was atrocious. It felt like the gun was like coming out of like the left side of my eyeball or the right side of my eyeball. It was really bad. But overall, like, I really actually enjoyed the story. I thought the characters were really funny and likable, and the game overall just wasn't that bad. Split Second is a really cool game. Again, I don't want to get into it a whole lot. I really like it. It's one of the most unique racing games I've ever played, and it's really, really fun. But the AI has weird difficulty spikes, and it makes it really hard to do certain things. And also, for as long as the story mode is, I think they reuse the same tracks a little too frequently.
Mm-hmm.
There's basically like 12... The story mode is framed as like a TV show, and you're on this TV show. It's like a reality TV show with all the racing and stuff. And there's 12 episodes. Each episode has like 5 events or so, and then you get to move on to the next one. And within like the first 4 episodes, like, you've already replayed like 3 or 4 of a specific track the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's interesting about it, if you don't know, is what I guess the gimmick of this game is that you charge up like an ability bar, and then if you save it all the way to the end and use it at certain points in the map, you can drastically change the map. Like something like a tower will explode and like smash onto the road and completely divert you to a new area. So you can make the races themselves different, like on each playthrough, and that's supposed to like make them feel more different. But when it's the same environments, like multiple races in a row, like, it just kind of felt like they didn't have enough tracks. But overall, like, it's a really fun racing game. I'm not sure if you can still play multiplayer on it or not. I don't know
Probably
if they have
not.
servers for it still, but it is a really fun racing game that I think is a little bit either underrated or under talked about. I don't know, under discussed, just because, I mean, everybody always thinks of like the racing sims like Forza or Gran Turismo or something like Mario Kart, but Split Second's a really good racing game at its core. And that's about it. I started Sly 4, Thieves in Time, but I don't have a DualShock 3 controller, so I got kind of blocked out of progressing until you lent me yours here today. So I'll be continuing that. But so far, I mean, I really like Sly, and this just seems like a new version of Sly that is really fun.
Yeah. Yeah, so for some of the other stuff I've been playing, I got Mortal Kombat 11 on release. I actually only paid like $25 for it because I had like an Amazon gift card that I forgot about. I was going to get the premium edition, but I thought, first of all, it was kind of dumb to pay like $30+ for characters that I don't really know are going to be in the game or not, or I don't know if I'm going to like them, don't know if I'm going to be into the game as much as I was for MKX, especially because near the end of the countdown to 11, I was starting to get a little burnt out on playing MKX anyway. So I canceled my pre-order on the premium edition, and And also, the character I played so much in MKX was Melina, and I was super excited for her in MK11, and as time went on, it seemed more and more likely that she wasn't going to be in this one, so that was another reason why I was like, yeah, whatever, combat pack, fuck this. If there was a character I really want to play as, I'll just buy it individually or wait for the complete edition or something. So anyway, I've been playing MK11 since its release, and for the most part, I really enjoy it. I thought the story mode was really entertaining, although the ending was a little stupid. I won't spoil it for people, and I don't want to talk too long about these other games real quick. I don't want to talk too long about these other games real quick. It's unnecessary. I'm getting tired. Sorry. I would say the gameplay is probably the best it's ever been. It's a bit more slow-paced than X was, which is a good thing because X was too focused on I'm going to hit you once, and then I can get a 50% combo, and then you hit me once, you get a 50% combo, and that was like pretty much all online devolved into after a while, depending on who you were playing against. If there's people that just wanted to win, they would just sit in a corner, like crouch guarding, and waiting until you game over and did something, and that was really, really stupid. I actually haven't played 11 online at all yet. I'm just too lazy to get the Ethernet cord and plug it in. And I was also taking the time to pick a character that I wanted to play as. I think Kung Lao was at least the first one I really wanted to play as. I played as Jade in the beta. She was cool, but it felt like you had to put in a lot more effort to win matches with her than compared to like Baraka or some of the other characters. And in the final game, her tournament builds don't include extra combos that I like to use in the beta, so I don't really use Jade that much anymore. Kung Lao is cool. He's fun to play as, but all the character dialogues are really annoying because they all just shit on Kung Lao, and it gets really old after a while. And there's a lot of other characters that I was interested in that I just haven't tried yet, and I'm not super motivated to do so right now. I'm kind of tired of Mortal Kombat, and actually, recently, I kind of just wanted to go back to MKX to finish stuff up anyway, so I might just end up going back to X and then shelving it for now. The Crypt is okay. It was really shitty for a while there, then they kind of fixed some things. I don't feel like talking about Mortal Kombat 11. Whatever, it's okay. Let's go on to something else that I'd rather talk about.
One thing that I just realized that we didn't bring up, and that we likely will not get into tonight, but some other time we definitely should, was we both played Devil May Cry 5.
Oh yeah, we still haven't really talked about that yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to that eventually.
We had intended on recording a review podcast, sort of like the Red Dead podcast we did on it, but never got around to it, obviously.
Yeah, we'll get around to it sooner or later. A few other games real quick. I started replaying Fable because for some reason I was really in a Fable mood, but that game kept freezing, so I kind of stopped playing it.
Was this the original?
It was the original, but it was the Anniversary Edition, which I had never played before, and I enjoyed it for the most part. But
real quick, I know you said you didn't want to harp on it too long. How are the visuals like in that version? Are they like much better, or is it like? I
guess it depends on who you ask. They're okay. The original was a much more colorful game, I think, and the Anniversary Edition kind of looks a little muddy. So I honestly sort of prefer the visuals in the original. And a lot of the character models still look kind of very dated and kind of ugly like they did in the original anyway, and there's like bad texture work here and there. So it's really not, I don't know. You can play the original. It's fine. The only real nice thing about this is that it's widescreen, and also they have adapted controls from Fable 2 and 3, so it controls a little bit better. But from what I played, it was still pretty fun, I guess. But I never had my heart set on it, and like I said, the game just froze too many times, and at that point, it was just like, whatever. I really don't feel like going through this entire thing right now. I got my little Fable fix in there. I'm excited for Fable 4. Hopefully they show that at E3, if it is a real thing.
Yeah.
I was doing another playthrough of Resident Evil 4. I have no clue how many I'm up to at this point, but I recently bought it at a game store Nick and I went to. I bought two things. I bought the Wii version of Resident Evil 4 and a game called Black on the original Xbox, which I heard was really, really good. And I had never really played the Wii version of Resident Evil 4, but after playing it pretty thoroughly at this point, I can pretty much hands down say it's my favorite version of the game. I've heard nothing but positive things about it before playing it, and after playing it, I can confirm that it's awesome, and it's the best way to control the game. Only downsides to it really are that it doesn't play at 60 FPS like the more recent versions. It's obviously in standard definition, which is okay. And I told Nick that it looks really, really nice on a CRT. So if you have one of those, the game looks really, really nice. It is kind of annoying though, because it does play in widescreen by default. So I have a big CRT that's a big square, but it only fills up like a little bit of it. But it doesn't look bad, and you get used to it quickly. At least it's not like Evil Within 1, where literally the black bars are cutting off the gameplay and making it harder to play. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like compared to Nick's HD TV, the game looks like ass on that. But you play it on a CRT, it looks a lot clearer, and it looks really, really nice. And there's also muddy textures, which is a problem on every version except for the PC version with the mod by Chris and Albert with the HD texture mod. That's the only version that has perfect textures, perfect performance, and everything, except it does not have the Wii controls. And the textures are less of a problem on the Wii version because you're playing it at standard definition, so it's a little bit harder to notice, but it has all the content that you'd want from the PS2 version, and generally all around it's really, really awesome. So I would say, if you ask me what the best version of Resident Evil 4 is, it's either the Wii version or the PC version with the HD texture pack. Pick your poison. Better controls or better frame rate and a beautiful looking game. Up to you. But the Wii version kicks ass. It's so much fun to play. And I finished it on normal, did the extra stuff, so I did Assignment Ada, did Separate Ways, and I played a little bit of the Mercenaries, which I've still never 100%ed. I'm guilty of that. Even though I played that game so much, I've never really 100%ed Mercenaries. And then I decided to do another playthrough on Professional. This is always a problem every time I play Resident Evil 4. It's always like, okay, I just did one playthrough, that's all I wanted to do, and then I start up another one, and then it's like, yeah, I'm just going to play it for like a half hour, and then I'll just stop, and I'm done with this game now, and then it's like, okay, it turns into an entire playthrough again. And it's also the same whenever I'm just going through the levels, and it's like, I'm going to stop here. And it's like, well, I really shouldn't stop here because there's another save point up here, so I can play a little bit longer. And you end up playing through a few more levels. Yeah, I was playing on Professional, and I had just gotten past a bunch of tough stuff on that difficulty, and I said, I'm not going to save because everything's going well so far, and I'm just going to finish this level, and I'll have an automatic save right there, so I'm just going to get to there, and that'll be it for tonight. And for those of you who don't know, my Wii has been acting up for quite a long time. I either have like a dirty disk drive, or some of the gears are
dirty disk drive
are fucked up on my Wii, so it had trouble taking discs for a while, but I recently just brought it out on a whim and hooked it back up again, and it worked. So I played a shitload of Resident Evil 4 with that. But anyway, once I finally finished the level, wouldn't you know it, the game could not be read anymore. The Wii crapped out on me. So I tried to fix it. I unscrewed a few things, but of course, in typical Nintendo fashion, they have to put stupid screws on their consoles for screwdrivers that nobody has. So I couldn't get that open, and I was so tired last night because I just had like an introduction to a new job, so I had to wake up at like 7, which was a little out of the ordinary for me, and I was just getting so tired and fed up. I was like almost ripping the front of my Wii off to try to look at the disk drive with the screws still on, and I was like, okay, I just need to go to bed. So Nick's letting me borrow his Wii for now. The good news is that I can just transfer saves to an SD drive and keep using them, so I'm going to finish Resident Evil 4 on his Wii. Then I think I want to play... I just bought Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles and Darkside Chronicles, which are like the light gun on-rail shooter Resident Evil games. That's kind of acts as like a retrospective of a lot of the series. So I'm looking forward to playing that on the Wii. I want to replay No More Heroes, and I considered trying the Metroid Prime trilogy again as well. But yeah, and then eventually I want to buy my own Wii again, and then I'm going to have 2. One is going to be for like homebrew stuff and virtual console games that I bought. And then the other one is just going to be for, it could be for Wii and GameCube games, actually. So I can put my GameCube back into retirement downstairs. So, yeah, more RE4 is always good. It makes me very happy. But now I'm at the point where, like I said, okay, there was all those Wii games I wanted to play, but there's also a bunch of other games I want to play. Some of them I've played before, and I just have a hankering to do. I want to play more Resident Evil 5 because that game is awesome, especially if you're playing with friends. So I want to play that game more. I want to try Resident Evil 6 again, give it more of a fair chance. I want to try Dark Souls 2 again, give that more of I gave that game a fair chance, actually, but I will try it one more time.
A second fair chance.
I will try it one more time to get into it, see if I can become a fan by the end of it. Speaking of Souls, I also want to play through Demon Souls again. That's a really nice short game, so it's very easy to get through it. Love the atmosphere in that game. I think it probably has the best or second best atmosphere, second to Bloodborne in the entire series, even though the later games are, better from a technical and gameplay standpoint. I think Demons is awesome. And there's probably a few other games here and there that I felt like playing. It's just a weird moment where it's just like I want to play a little bit of everything. And the last game I'll talk about is Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Ultimate, which I bought on PS4 because it was on sale for $10. That game is fun, but I'm not very good at it. Because all the characters are obviously really fun because they're from Capcom and Marvel, so they're all fun to play as and just try their moves out and everything. But the game has very, very, very strict timings on moves and combos, and I'm not used to it coming from Mortal Kombat, because Mortal Kombat you can kind of just dial a combo. So like if a Kung Lao combo is like triangle square, triangle square, triangle circle, you can just go blah, 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 and type it in real fast and he'll just follow through with the animation. Mm-hmm. And there's not really a whole lot of timing involved. With Marvel vs. Capcom 3, I've been trying to do like the character missions, which kind of show you different combos you can do with each character, and I can only get like halfway through. Eventually it just gets to like this one combo where it seems like it's really simple. It's like crouching low, crouching mid, crouching high, then you launch him up into the air, and then it's like medium, hard special attack. Seems like it'd be an easy combo, and it's the same for every character, but it's like the timing is so extremely specific that you can try it over and over again for 15 minutes, and it's like you still just cannot do the combo. Every time it falls, every time I'm too short, I can't hit the enemy. It's like, it just drives me nuts, and then I move on to the next character.
I remember that being like my experience while playing. Like, I was not good at all with Capcom.
And there's some inputs that are just fucking annoying, and I feel like I could never get them to be consistent, where it's like, one that's annoying is like, you have to go like forward and then like down forward and then do like a button press, but half the time it just turns into down forward button press, so it's a different special attack, and it's like, I don't know if I can ever consistently do that. Mm-hmm. It's too annoying, like, let alone chain it into combos whenever I need it. It's like, I even struggled on like arcade mode on easy. I'll even admit it. Like, I got to Galactus and got pissed off. I was like, I don't want to do this. So, but the characters I like to play as, I like Doctor Doom. I know he's like a top tier character. I'm very good at picking top tier characters, even when I don't realize it. Don't shit on me. I like Virgil a lot, who's also a top tier character. So I was obviously going to have him in my team. And She-Hulk was pretty fun too. She's actually a low tier, so. Anyway, but yeah, I'm not getting very serious about Marvel vs. Capcom. It's a game I kind of get on, play a little bit, and then it's like, okay, this is pissing me off. And then I'll do something else.
Yeah.
Oh, I will talk about one other game real quick. Monster Hunter World. Monster Hunter World, it has a free trial from, I think, May 10th to May 20th. So I took that opportunity to really give this game a chance, because I've tried Monster Hunter in the past. I tried Monster Hunter for the 3DS, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the demo. And I tried the Monster Hunter World demo, which I didn't like either. But this time I said, a lot of people have told me you got to put in like 4 hours before you really start to get into it and understand all the systems. So I'm like 5 or 6 hours into it right now, and I would say that I like the game. but I don't love it. I never really felt that I've loved. There was never a moment that I said I love this game, except for when I created the character, because the character creation was awesome. I'll always give it bonus points for that. But I always feel like I'm doing something wrong, or like the battles, like they just go on forever. It seems. I picked a longsword as my weapon, and I try to upgrade it as often as I can. I forge it. I use the whetstone during battles to keep sharpening it before I attack the monster. I try to find the weak point, and the battles just go on for like 10 to 15 minutes sometimes, and it's just like, it's very repetitive. Like, you just find the monster, and then you do the slash, then you do the slash, and then he moves, and you do the slash, and then he gets pissed off, and then it runs away, and then you have to go chase after it for a while. Do the slash, blah, 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 it runs away again. Slash, 15, 20 minutes later, you're done with a fight, and the mission's over. But it just gets very, very boring to me. I really don't like fights like that, and I think this game is a little too focused on RPG stuff for me. I like action RPGs, but I don't like it when it's more RPG than action, I guess. So Souls is an action RPG, but you can pretty much play it like an action game. Like, that's how I play it. I just get a big fucking sword, like the Claymore, and I just two-hand it and don't even worry about parrying. I just roll and hit shit, and it works just fine. I don't know what like half the items do in the game, and it's like, I don't care about all this sorcery crap. Like, just let me hit shit and I'll get through the game. This one, I think there's a lot more like, oh, for this monster you need to use a ghillie suit and hide here and shoot it with poison arrows or something. It's like, I don't care. I'm too impatient for this.
Yeah.
I'm not saying the game is bad. It's just not for me. I don't want to figure any of that out. I just want to hit things. I like figuring out the patterns and dodging them and then hitting them. But I don't know, Monster Hunter is really for me. And it's the same with like armor. It's like, I thought I would get new armor in this game, but every time I go to the forge after a mission, there's no new armor. It's the same armor I had at the beginning of the game. I don't know if I have to craft it, but there's all these different systems that you have to talk to all these different people, and it's just not for me.
Yeah.
I don't like it that much.
I dabbled like you in the 3DS one for maybe like 20 minutes a long time ago, and that's all of my experience with Monster Hunter.
Yeah, and the combat is also like, if you thought Souls was like, oh, you really have to commit to attacks, like this game is extremely attack commit heavy. It's very slow. It feels very clunky. Even if you pick like the fastest weapon, it is still slow. And half the time, like, the monsters are so big, like they'll just like fucking clip through the ground, like doing like, if there's like a monster that's supposed to like swim through mud, for instance, like, you know, this monster, there's no fucking way he could swim through the mud because he's way too big, and he'll just you know, do a dolphin dive and like have his tail sticking up like 50 feet in the air, and half of his body is like literally probably digging into rock, but he still like does it, and he's like flopping around and clipping through objects and shit, and it's very awkward looking. I don't like stuff like that. It's too janky for me. But I also haven't played it with other people, which I know is a big draw. But I don't know. It's just too much little micromanaging systems, and I don't like that. I wanted to play another Capcom RPG called Dragon's Dogma again. That's another game I want to replay. That game has been simpler, and the combat was a lot more fun. So I think I'm going to stick with that. I'm also at this, like I said, I was at this boss in Monster Hunter where like you have to put a ghillie suit on or something and fight it, and if it smacks you one time, it does like half your health, and it's like, I'm not doing this. Sorry. I want to love every Capcom game, but I don't think this one's for me, and I'm just too impatient with this. I don't really want to learn all the RPG ins and outs, and people online don't seem to help that much anyway. They're just like, make sure you collect a bunch of shit. And it's like, yeah, obviously, and make sure you use your whetstone to sharpen your weapon. And it's like, okay, I do that every time it goes into the yellow, and it's still just kind of boring. Sorry, Monster Hunter fans. I'm probably just a retard and don't know how to play the game correctly. But whatever. I tried it. It's okay. It's just not really my thing. So.
Yeah. There's a couple games like you that I've been wanting to replay recently. Mainly Mafia 2 and LA Noire for some reason. I just really kind of had a hankering for those.
Cole Phelps.
I have too many other new things that I want to play. But I think that's probably going to do it for this podcast. We've been gabbing on for quite a bit. Check out some of our other podcasts here and our other videos on the channel. And yeah, we're gonna keep on making cool stuff and talking about games. We got E3 coming up, so probably gonna be doing a lot of content on that as well.
Get excited. We're mainly excited for the Microsoft press conference and
'Cause they're having
and
it, Sony.
Nintendo. Yeah, Sony's not going to be there. Hopefully, Microsoft has some interesting stuff to show. I would love to see the new Fable. This is going to be the first one not under Peter Molyneux, so hopefully it ends up being really good. I don't know if Playground Studios is a British developer, but if they're not, that does concern me a bit because the Fable series relied so much on British humor and it was very unique in that regard. I think like the only other British humor game that comes to mind is Conquer, because that game has like shit jokes everywhere, so it's very obviously a British game. But yeah, the Fable games, if nothing else, were pretty charming, I think. So hopefully that's a thing. Might see some Metroid Prime 4. I don't know, they kind of restarted development on that game.
Yeah, we should hold off. We should make a separate video. On
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna shut the podcast off now.
Yes. If you enjoyed, leave a like. Maybe consider subscribing. Get updated whenever we do that. Follow us on Twitter at PixelsGradient.
And put an air conditioner in your room, unlike Nick, who likes to wallow in his own sweat all the time. I hate being in this room.
See you in the next one.
Bye.